Welcome to the Sheffield Sunday As Bill Sees It meeting. This is a main share meeting, and today it is with great pleasure and much gratitude that we welcome Doug M. from New York, who's come to share for about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for general sharing, or if you'd like to ask a question. Doug, thank you so much. It is wonderful to have you here with us today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sky. My name is Doug. I'm a recovered alcoholic, and it's a privilege to be asked to speak at any AA meeting. I'll try to do my best to share my experience with this reading and what it's meant to me, and what I've learned from my time in AA. So this life is not a dead end, as Bill sees it. This excerpt from page 106 and 107 and the 12 and 12 is, for all intents and purposes, the definition of what a spiritual experience is. And it talks about it also, back in our big book, and there's a solution when Roland Hazard is talking to Dr. Young, and Dr. Young is describing what he sees as the only thing that'll save Roland. Roland has spent time in treatment with him, and he thought that he'd learned so much about himself that self-knowledge, would suffice to keep him from drinking again. And he leaves treatment, and in a few days he's drunk again. And he goes back to the doctor and says, "Doctor, why is this? Is there no hope for me?" And he says, "No, I've never seen one single case like yours recover where the state of mind exists where it does in you." And he says, "Is there no exception?" And he goes into a definition there as well. He tells him what his only hope might be. He says, "Here, there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, they are a phenomenon. Can't explain them, don't know how they happen, can't recreate them. But he's, through history, from the beginning of time, there have been these little points where, for some unknown reason, people have been able to receive this power, strength, direction that has been able to them to transform and recover from alcoholism." And this is what we find out, that I find out is essential, right? I can't recover from this without this psychic change, this vital spiritual experience that I have to have if I'm going to survive. And I missed that. I don't know if I missed it or I just didn't like it. And I just wouldn't quite fully accept it when I first came into the rooms. I wanted to stop drinking. I knew I had to stop drinking. It was killing me, right? But I looked at this whole program, with this skepticism, right? With this prejudice, So I come in, I'm in my 30s or so. I had spent a couple decades drinking, and drinking was fun. It worked for me for a lot of years. And at some point I passed into this place, I'd crossed that invisible line where my drinking had taken on greater proportions, as Bill talks about. And I was on this slow progression that I was unaware of. I thought that alcohol was the only thing that was keeping me sane through this crazy life that we live, right? And I get to this place where I'm locked up in my apartment. I'm no longer working, and I'm drinking around the clock. And that's the one thing I thought in my earlier on, that I would never ever amount to that. I grew up in a family with an alcoholic mother, and I was determined that that was not going to be me. But yet, lo and behold, 20 years later, here I am. So I knew of AA. I had been exposed to AA. I had friends whose parents were in AA with long time sobriety. So I was no stranger to it, but I really didn't know what it was about, other than you go to meetings and somehow you can stay away from a drink. And so I showed up in an AA group and sat, and I listened, and I shook, and I was shaking and detoxing in the front row, and I was able to stay away from a drink. a day at a time, making a whole lot of meetings, but yet still with this resistance to what you all were telling me, because I was still convinced that there was something in me, like Roland, that's something I needed to acquire. There was something wrong with, whatever it was with me, that I just was missing this piece that allowed me to function normally like the rest of the world. I didn't understand anything about this disease, not the physical nor the mental obsession. And so I was limited, in my experience or my ability to stay stopped, let's put it that way. I came in and I took pieces that I thought were acceptable, and I did certain things that I agreed with, and I discarded the rest, because I heard things like, take what you like and leave the rest. And that sounded perfect to me. I can pick and choose. If I don't like it, don't have to do it. And as a result, I stayed sober for maybe, I think it was like 88 days, and then I decided that I had enough, had the cliff notes, got it. Thank you very much. You're all nice people, but I really don't need a whole new group of friends. I'm good. See you later. And it wasn't too long, about 10 months later, I was back at the bottom again. And a little further down the road than I was before. And I realized that some of the things that had seeped into this brain unconsciously, started to just scream out to me. Things like, if you doubt whether you're an alcoholic, try some controlled drinking. Step up to the nearest bar, and try drinking and stopping abruptly. And I found myself in a bar, and that line popped into my head as I'm ordering my first drink. And now I was in that bar trying to white knuckle it, from Monday to Thursday, to prove that I wasn't an alcoholic. I'd stopped drinking on Sunday, and then I mean, it was just torturous. I would get through Monday, and I would get through Tuesday, and I'd get through Wednesday. And then by Wednesday night, I'm saying, Thursday's coming, see if I can make it through. Well, it's almost a whole week, right? 4 days, 3 days, really. The parameters of success we're getting smaller and smaller, as I'm trying to justify why drinking is really not the problem. And so I find myself in this bar, and I order a drink, and I suck it down, and I get that sense of ease and comfort, and then that's just like barely kind of letting the steam out of the kettle, and I order the next one, and I'm into the second one, and that thought pops into my head, put it down and walk away. And I knew right then and there was absolutely no way that I could put that down and walk away. And that idea of the allergy, had set in, that there was something physically different with me as well as mentally different, and it started to kind of creep in that maybe what you all were talking about here wasn't a bunch of hooey, that there was some truth to it. And so I find myself again, at this place of desperation, crying out to God to either take me or to save me, and I didn't even believe in God, but suddenly it's funny how when your life's on the line, I find myself praying to something I don't believe in. I found myself one time hiking up in the mountains of Montana, and we got ourselves onto a cliff we couldn't get off of. I couldn't go down, I couldn't go up. And we had to jump onto this tree, and this tree was about 6 feet away. And it was a cliff straight down a mountainside. And we had no other way to get off it. I found myself praying and praying and praying. And you'd never heard the word God come out of my mouth before, but I look back now and realize that it's funny how that happens. And needless to say, we made it jumping onto the tree and made it here. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a speaker. But so back to this idea that I'm on my knees and I'm crying out with this desperation to this God that I didn't really believe in. So I thought, and I found my way back into the rooms and asked the old scary guy in the rooms, the crusty one, that gruff and because I figured in this moment of willingness, if I didn't grab onto the guy that I thought had, what I wanted, that had something to share with me, I was going to die, and that was the truth. So I came into this with a more open mind and a willingness to do what was suggested, and I went through the steps to the best of my ability at the time, under the guidance of someone, a well-meaning man who was sharing what had been imparted to him, And I later found out, I went through the steps and I had a spiritual awakening, sufficient to bring about recovery from the obsession to drink. It took some time. It took quite a bit of time. In fact, I think it was probably maybe 6-7 months or so before I realized that a whole day had gone by, I hadn't thought about a drink. That's what I would say was that point. Because up until that point, it was sometimes hour by hour, minute by minute. I was making three meetings a day, again, relying on these meetings to give me this relief. Because one thing I couldn't argue with was that, and someone pointed this out to me, he said, well, I had this problem with this idea of a higher power still, because I'd never had experience with this and it wasn't part of my upbringing. Is that when I left a meeting, did you feel better than when you walked in? I said, well, yeah, I do. He said, okay, well then let that be your higher power for now. You can't argue with that, can you? And I couldn't disagree with that. There was physical evidence that I felt better when I left a meeting. However, it had a short shelf life. It only lasted for so long before I was restless, irritable, and discontented again. And so you can, as I am proof that I was able to make it through making 3 and 4 meetings a day, morning, noon, night, and then sometimes, whatever, fellowship after into the wee hours, so that there was no way I was around or could come in contact or get triggered by the obsession to drink, and make it to bed and hopefully get up and start another day. So the obsession to drink was removed from me as a result of going through the steps. I had realized that some change had taken place. However, when I got through to 12 and maybe my first year or 2 years, I had that I was on kind of fire. I was excited. I was charged by the group. I was excited by what had happened to me. It was truly a miracle, because there was no way that I ever thought that it could be removed. I thought that really you just kind of keep each other. You sit around a table and one day, my friend Bill would say he thought AA was where we sit around a table and one day Joe says, I'm going to drink today, and everybody talks him out of it, and then the next day it's Jill, and Jill says, I feel like drinking today, and they all talk him out of it. And that was my understanding of what AA was, and so now I'm excited by this fact that it's actually been removed. I haven't been thinking about a drink. Now it would come back into my mind, certainly, from time to time, but those thoughts were brief, and I could quote unquote, think what was going to happen, but I really wasn't practicing this program in its entirety, is where I'm getting. And I stopped really, I missed the 12th step of carrying this message to other alcoholics, the necessity of doing that. And I didn't really have a great message to carry, to be honest, other than what had been shared with me in that meeting. That meeting, it did function, and I did function, but I was not rocketed into the 4th dimension. I was not experiencing, all the promises that they talk about in this book. I really thought they were kind of, exaggerated, because really, how could it really be that good, And I realized after a number of years of making meetings and being of service and making coffee and being the treasurer and bringing in speakers and going out on speaking engagements, that I could stay sober, but I was not happily and usefully whole or contented. I was angry, I was irritable and discontented. Although my life had expanded, now I'd gotten married, I had kids in my life. I'd moved on in my career, and life's pressures were on me. And I couldn't see how sick I was. I couldn't see that I was still the problem, that I was just not drinking, but I had not really changed much at all. And I would go to a meeting and come home and then yell at my kids. I would go to a meeting and an hour later be in a fight with my wife. And I really believed that it was their problem, that if they only did what they were supposed to do, we wouldn't be having this issue. And don't you understand that I'm under a lot of stress? Don't you understand that my job, is whatever, that, the expenses are whatever, that the bank account isn't, that all of these reasons of why justifying my behavior, you know. And if my wife only didn't fight me about how to raise the kids, if she just went on my plan about how to discipline them, we wouldn't be in these constant conflicts and they wouldn't be behaving this way, because this was my attitude. I really believed that everything was an external problem and that if anybody just listened to me, everything would be fine. So I hit this place of desperation later on. You know, the circumstances, you know, my wife got sick and she got cancer and she died inside of a year. And I found myself in this place of utter desperation again, you know, despair, self-pity, you know, confusion, fear, you know, waking up crippled. My eyes would open and I found myself, the first emotion I felt was fear. I'd have dreams, fearful dreams. I'd wake up terrified and I couldn't, I was immobilized. I was just absolutely at this place where I couldn't get out of it. No matter what I did, I was going to meetings, I was talking to other people, and I just could not get out of this place. And so I went into a meeting in a nearby town, and I met Anthony, who's on this meeting, and he suggested that I go back through the steps. And I was not too interested in doing that. And I said, thank you very much. I've been through the steps a number of times with a few sponsors, and it's very kind of you, but I don't think that's my problem. And he said, you know, you look like you're in a lot of pain. You know, I don't think it could really hurt you, do you? And he says, you know, we've been doing this and we do it quick. We go through the work and you might have a new experience. It happened for me with my sponsor at 18 years. I've been doing the same thing that sounds like you've been doing for the last, whatever it was, 16 years, or whatever it was at the time, I don't remember. Maybe it'll work for you. And so I agreed to do it. And we went through the book again, line by line, page by page. And it was like a whole new experience, like a book I'd never seen before. And I read this book sitting in big book meetings, reading page by page with other people, you know, in the group. And yet we would never really understood or, you know, what they were talking about. So I had this new experience and I started to see concepts because maybe I was made ready to see them, that certain things took time for me to sink in. However, I see other people new in sobriety that go through this book thoroughly with someone who's armed with the facts, and they seem to be avoiding a lot of that stuff. And so it's proven to me that I think that maybe, and again, it's just a theory, that maybe if the people that I try to carry this message with now, with the understanding that I have, maybe they'll be saved a lot of the pain and anguish that I had to go through. However, you know, that said, you know, I think it's an individual path, certainly, and my job is to carry this to the best of my ability and share with those my experience with not doing what's suggested as well as doing what's suggested. So this whole idea of having this spiritual awakening, you know, eluded me, or let's say this, I only wanted so much of this as necessary. You know, I didn't want to have too much of a spiritual awakening because that's a little terrifying. If I don't understand what it is, you know, I mean, really subconsciously in the back of my mind, it's a little scary about this power that can change and restore me, you know, change me and recreate me, basically, is what it's talking about here. But the attitude that's necessary to receive this gift, as they describe in the reading, you know, requires me to go through the steps thoroughly and completely to the best of my ability. And that was something that I really hadn't been doing. So I go back through this work with this new attitude, and I have this new experience, and I start to see these concepts that jump out, you know, like that God is everything. Well, he is nothing. And that's the first and foremost one, is that in my mind, did I really believe that God is everything? Did I really believe that he's something when I need him, that I can kind of recreate him and tap into him just when I'm in trouble? And it talks about that, you know, in steps 6 and 7, you know, that God is a, you know, a bush league pinch hitter that I use when I need him. And understanding, you know, the disease that I suffer from, that every morning I wake up with this this with the ego intact. I want to run, I want to control, I want to fix, I want to manage my day, and that I have to get myself into the right frame of mind to remind myself exactly who and what I am from experience, that I'm an alcoholic, that left untreated will end up in the same places that I came from, and that there are certain actions I have to take to be able to stay spiritually fit. And that's the practice of 4 through 9, repeated, and living in steps 10, 11, and 12 is a repetition of the steps that I did previously, in taking inventory and watching for these defects of character when they crop up, not if they crop up, but they're going to crop up. And these are the tools that's designed for living that I've now embraced, because I understand that I'm not unique and that I suffer from this disease that centers in my mind, not my body. So where am I going with this? This whole concept of this definition of the spiritual awakening, it says the most important meaning of it is that he has now been able to do, feel, and believe that which he could not do before on his unaided strength and resources alone. He has been granted a gift which amounts to a new state of consciousness and being. And so that describes a transformation, is what it describes. And just like, on page 26, or Roland Hazard, when he describes the spiritual experience, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of these men's minds, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions begins to dominate them quickly. And that's exactly a repetition of that, and that's exactly what has happened for me. Is that I haven't been given this. I'm not given this power that I'm then able to control and manage my life, or to battle alcohol. I allow this power to come into my life that does the work, and I just sit and be willing to be transformed. And that shift in attitude between those two concepts was really important for me. Is that I wanted to be given the power so that more power so that I can run the show and create my life the way I want. And this crushing that needed to take place for me to finally get through this thick head, that it's not about me and what I want. And that if I want to live happily and usefully whole, I wake up in the morning and I submit myself to God to use me however he sees fit. And this power then comes in, and I received the strength and direction to do what I don't believe I can do when I'm presented with the opportunities to be useful and helpful in his work. And when I wake up with that attitude to be of service to God and to others around me and forget about myself, this is when this change comes about. And that's what I have to share on this, is that one, the elements to become willing to receive this. I've got to go through this work in order to have this spiritual awakening. It doesn't just happen. It's not an intellectual process. It's not something that I absorb out of a book. It's something that I take actions that I don't understand, agree with, or certainly want to do. But out of desperation, I take these actions, regardless of what I think about them, and I set myself in motion to have this experience. And it starts with just the concept it starts with step 1, in the firm belief that I am done. I'm cooked. I am not only powerless, I'm a dead man. I'm going to drink. It's not that I can't drink, but the first step experience for me really, and when I went back through the book, was understanding that it's not a question of that I can't drink. It's that I'm going to drink. That's the guarantee. Is that without treatment of that restless, irritable, discontented state, when I'm sober, I have no choice but to seek relief somehow. And it's going to lead to a drink. It may be a matter of time, but it's going to lead. I cannot exist in that state inevitably without change. And so understanding that that's the fact there, then I come to the second step, which coming to believe in this power greater than myself that could restore me to sanity if I rightly align myself and become willing to accept. And that's where the concept of God is everything or he's nothing. He either is or he isn't. And I'm faced with this decision. What is my choice to be? God is or he isn't. I can't have it both ways. And so I, again, not fully convinced, but I'm willing to say, you know, God, life is better with God in it. Since I can't prove either, guess what? I'll take God in it because it seems to work a heck of a lot better. And so I go down this path with just this little bit of open-mindedness and this willingness. And it says that often, you know, a change is felt, you know, dramatically. As soon as I open my mind to the possibility that, yeah, there is an exist, that is it possible that there's something brighter than me, smarter than me out there in this world that keeps the, you know, the earth spinning on its axis? Of course, it seems almost ridiculous for me to think otherwise. You know, I see the intellectual arrogance in this, trapped in this mind of mine, you know, that I can't see the truth of the world around me. And so this, my brain gets cracked open just enough to let a little bit of light in. And then in 3, I see that I make this decision that, yeah, you know what? I don't know what it is, can't define it, can't prove it, but it's there. It's clearly there. So I'm going to try to align myself with it. And I'm going to turn my life over to the care. Because you know what, I'm this illusion that I'm actually controlling my life is just that, it's an illusion. And look what I've done with it. You know, I've made a mess of it. I couldn't possibly do a worse job, you know, so I have nothing to lose. And so by the practice of going through these steps, I set myself up to make myself ready or to receive this gift that they talk about. And this is this path that is really going somewhere, that life is not a dead end. The psychological change that comes about as I am changed, that these ideas, attitudes, and emotions, which were once the guiding force of my life, are transformed and replaced with a completely new set of conceptions. That, no, life is not to be endured. Life is a precious gift. I enjoy every minute of it, you know, and that being of service is something that I would never think of. You know, if it didn't serve me, I didn't do it. If it didn't serve me in some way, shape, or form, I didn't do it. And this has completely changed. I understand that that is the freedom. That is the gift, that when I get myself out of me and am of service to others, that I receive more of this, that I am more free, that I enjoy more peace of mind, that I enjoy more joy. It's not something that life is not something to be endured or mastered. You know, again, this delusion that I can somehow control, manage, or fix, and create the outcome that I think is going to help me or be useful to me. And the source of strength, which he has hitherto denied, that up until this point, I have been the one that has denied this strength. I have kept this out of my life. It's always been there. Been born. God was in me when I was born. Fundamentally, inside of every man, woman, and child is a fundamental idea of God. I was the one that separated myself from God, and nothing else. And so the understanding of all of this, that the little bit of experience that I have going down this path and having these little spiritual awakenings, right? Having the psychic change that is still going on as my mind continues to change and be transformed by him. As I align myself with him, I'm in this continual path of change. So I hope, as long as I continue to practice these steps, I can receive more of this. And part of this, not part of this, but the whole point of this is for me to be of service to others and to carry this message to whoever I can, however I can, in and out of the rooms, is to be of use. And nothing is more joyful than that. And nothing is more satisfying than that. And nothing has given me, you know, greater sense of purpose and self-worth. Instead of just sitting on this planet, sucking air and accumulating dollars in my bank account, I actually can feel some real sense of worth, that I can make a difference in people's lives. And certainly in those sick and suffering, because I've become uniquely qualified to deal with this specific issue for those who are sick and suffering. So that's enough out of me. Thanks so much for asking.